Doc Rightwing here, and today I want to talk about what Democrats really think of democracy. Spoiler alert, they aren't big fans of it. We've all heard the leftists expressing their grave concerns over insurrectionists and threats to democracy in countless clips from CNN, the halls of Congress, or libs of TikTok. And I hope we all know how completely full of shit they are. Because they have such a blatant double standard that you'd have to be blind, deaf, and dumb not to see it. Take, for instance, the leaked Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade, and imagine what they'd be saying if the shoe was on the other foot. Let's say that the decision actually invalidated any restrictions against abortion, immediately striking down any state laws that stood in the way of a woman's right to choose. And then let's say that the decision was leaked, a bunch of angry conservatives doxed the liberal Supreme Court justices and held angry protests outside their houses, which is clearly against federal law, as Tucker succinctly explains.
According to 18 U.S. Code 1507, the official position of the U.S. government is you're not allowed to intimidate judges. Period. Quote, whoever with the intent of interfering with, obstructing, or impeding the administration of justice, or with the intent of influencing any judge, juror, witness, or court officer in the discharge of his duty, pickets or parades in or near a building housing a court of the United States, or in or near a building or residence occupied or used by such judge, juror, witness, or court officer, or with such intent uses any sound truck or similar device, or resorts to any other demonstration in or near any such building or residence, shall be fined or imprisoned. So it's very clearly a crime.
Let's further pretend that the Trump administration was still running the executive branch and they refused to condemn the leak or the protests, which are both clearly intended to influence the decision of the court. Does anyone have a doubt that the protesters would be called insurrectionists and a threat to democracy, just like they did with the January 6th riot? Does anyone doubt that Trump's refusal to condemn the unlawful intimidation tactics of the protests would be grounds for a third impeachment attempt? What if this were Kayleigh McEnany instead of Jen Psaki?
Back to abortion, if I can. Yesterday you said the leak raises eyebrows, including for many here in the White House. But does the White House explicitly condemn this leak, or has seeing this draft been seen as welcome by some here?
I don't think we have a particular view on that other than to say that we certainly note the unprecedented nature of it.
Of course, Psaki doesn't mind a little court intimidation, as long as they're intimidating them in the right direction. By the way, if you're one of those intellectually dishonest or intellectually bankrupt people that refuses to admit the double standard I'm pointing out, you're an exceptional example of dipshittery, which shall henceforth be considered a word. Of course, the situation would be entirely different if the shoe were on the other foot. The protests would be rebranded riotous insurrections, and the lawlessness and rage of an angry right wing would pose a grave threat to democracy. After all, they're attacking the very legitimacy of one of the three branches of our government. The situation would be dark and dangerous indeed. I'll admit, it was hard for me to make sense of this. How could leftists hold such obvious double standards? And how could the sheep that vote for them not see the clear hypocrisy? But I think I may have figured out a big piece of the puzzle. You see, they have made every single political issue a moral question. Their media machines have implanted the idea of a racist, homophobic, sexist right wing deep into the malleable minds of those most susceptible to the kind of heavy-handed brainwashing you see on MSNBC or Twitter. Trump was, maybe still is, Hitler, and we're all his Nazis. So what I think has happened, and what we're seeing here, is the end stage of that indoctrination. They really do think of all these political issues as moral issues, and they believe that we disagree with them on these issues as a consequence of our many prejudices. In the end, our vote is a vote for racism, xenophobia, and hate of all kinds. Put simply, our very vote is immoral. With that in mind, I want you to listen to this quote from Jessica Levinson, who, believe it or not, is a law professor, as she explains why we shouldn't allow conservatives to vote on abortion.
Think about equal protection. We don't want to leave that to the voters as to whether or not we'll respect equal protection. Think about other due process rights. We don't want to leave it to the voters as to whether or not criminal defendants can obtain due process of the law. And I think the same thing goes for the right of reproductive choice. We don't want to leave this to a legislative matter as to whether or not women have the right to choose.
She's essentially saying that our desire to restrict abortion is so morally abhorrent that we cannot allow people to vote on it. What I'm seeing, and what makes all this make more sense, is that they're so sure that they have the moral high ground that they're willing to dispense with democracy itself in order to prevent us from getting our way. I mean, they called President Trump illegitimate, and many still do, even after the Mueller investigation exonerated him. But here's the thing. I think they considered him illegitimate because they consider our racist, redneck, smelly Walmart person vote illegitimate. In short, they don't believe in democracy for Nazis. But to all those self-assured leftists out there, I hate to break it to you guys, you don't appear to believe in democracy at all. As a side note, Levinson's argument is pathetic, and I'm not sure how this person holds a job as a law professor. She mentioned equal protection under the law and due process rights as examples of laws that we, quote, don't want to leave to the voters, supposedly because they are clearly righteous, virtuous laws. And then she simply names abortion as a third example and asserts that abortion is as clear-cut as the previous two examples. That's absurd, and I'm going to make it clear why that's absurd by playing this clip again, but this time I'm going to change a few of the words to explain the real reason why we shouldn't leave abortion to the voters.
Think about equal protection. We don't want to leave that to the voters as to whether or not we'll respect equal protection. Think about other due process rights. We don't want to leave it to the voters as to whether or not criminal defendants can obtain due process of the law. And I think the same thing goes for
the killing of the unborn.
We don't want to leave this to a legislative matter as to whether or not
the unborn have the right to life. So you see, since we clearly cannot allow the mass murder of the innocent unborn, we should not leave the matter of abortion up to a vote. It should be outlawed by judicial fiat immediately. And that's all for now, folks. Please like and subscribe. Visit my site, drightwing.com. And until next time, comrades.